Welcome back to FPL Therapy. This is a weekly podcast hosted by me, FPL Raptor, where I'll hopefully guide you through the FPL season and make you laugh along the way because everybody needs a little bit of FPL therapy. Each week we are joined by a different guest, and today I am delighted to say that we have Pras. Pras has 8 top 25k finishes, 4 top 10k finishes, and is also a co-host of the FPL Wire. Genuinely one of my favorite pieces of FPL content every single week. You can find them on YouTube, and if you are watching on YouTube, it will be linked down below, and also on audio platforms as well. I highly recommend checking it out. Pras, how are you doing, mate?
I'm doing very well. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Really nice idea. I was telling you pre-season that, and an in-person show is just absolutely something that was missing.
Feels good, doesn't it? Yeah.
Feels great. And, you can have a real chat talking all things FPL.
Yeah, I'm so excited for today. So Pras is just one of those people, and he'll be very modest and humble about this, but when he speaks, you listen, and you'll see that today, and you'll hear that today, that it's just little nuggets of information that you can't get anywhere else. So I'm excited for today. If you are listening on audio, please do rate 5-star. There have been so many of you that have very kindly done that, so I would appreciate if you enjoyed today's episode that you rate 5-star. And if you are watching on YouTube, please hit that like button, but most importantly, subscribe, because there will be an episode every single week with different guests throughout the season. So today, we've obviously had most of game week 1. We are recording this before the Spurs-Leicester game, so that's the only one we've not had. And obviously, this is the point we've been waiting for so long now during pre-season. So we'll talk about how our teams have performed in game week 1, and Pras and I do have very different teams. Some of the key events as well. We'll go through game by game, talk about players that looked good, fixtures coming up, etc. Answer some of your key questions around Quansah, Barco, and Nkunku, and much, much more. And then also discuss our teams for game week 2 and beyond as well. So we're going to start with Pras's team today. And a very interesting draft that we've not seen much because he has Salah and Haaland. So I'll read it out for those of you on audio. On YouTube, it'll be on your screen right now. So in goal, Henderson for 2 points. Trent, 8 points. Hall, 5. You started Barco, which we'll discuss in a bit. Obviously, he didn't feature. The midfield was Gordon, who got 3-pointer. Salah, you didn't captain, but got you 14 points. Jota with 8. Rodgers with 2. And then a front line of João Pedro, who did indeed blank, despite Brighton scoring 3, which again we'll discuss a bit later. Haaland with 7. And then Isak, captain, very unfortunate with 10. And then the bench looks pretty good as well. We've got Smith Rowe, Robinson, and Quansah. So just to remind you, in case you need it, I'll turn the laptop towards you.
Yeah.
But what I really want to know is, 61 points is a very decent start. Can you just give us a bit of justification? Because you're obviously a top manager. What was it that made you want to go with this Salah and Haaland structure where maybe you did have to sacrifice elsewhere, but you own the 2 best, most expensive players in the game?
Yeah, so, my thinking was I generally tend to look at fixtures a lot. When you listen to me, you will know that I fixate on fixtures. And basically, it was linked to my wildcard window.
Okay.
So I have planned a wildcard 6. And so if you look at the fixtures from 1 to 5, the teams with the best fixtures are Liverpool, Newcastle, Fulham.
Yep.
So that's the theme of the team, where I wanted to get a Mo Salah, I wanted to get a Jota, and I wanted to get a Trent. And I did waver between wildcard 4 and wildcard 6 because they are a little bit different. But that's what I went with. And I knew whoever's not starting with Salah will itch to get Salah by game week 4. I decided to start with both.
Okay, fantastic. And I found it quite interesting that you didn't choose to captain Salah. Was that you just really fancied the Isak fixture? Was it a bit of an ownership play, knowing that, in fact, Isak was probably the most highly captained?
I think it was a little bit of both, but more towards I just fancied more goals against Southampton. It was just the unfortunate red card. Otherwise, I was thinking Liverpool score maybe 2. And if you look at the first half against Ipswich, we talk about it, it was sort of panning out that way.
Yep.
And so it was just it's the red card that turned it. But I still thought Isak would be a better cap.
Okay. Well, are you happy with the start? Was you expecting a bigger game week 1, or do you think it's kind of in line with what you were expecting?
I think it's in line with what I was expecting. Okay. My barometer to see if your team is doing well after game week 1 is, do people want players you own?
Yep.
And are people ditching players you own?
Okay, so I like that.
So there's only one player that people are ditching that I own, and people do want players that I own. So that's a good start.
Overall success. Pras is a very calming influence, and I think today it's going to calm some of us down that are itching to wildcard and raise transfer, because it is only one game week. So we're going to talk about some of those key other players like Hall, like Barco, when we go through the games one by one. But just to let you know what team I ended on, I actually believe, apart from a couple of bench options change, it's the team that I did discuss in the FPL Therapy Game Week 1 episode with Harry. The only change was I brought in Porro for Guardiola. So to read that out for audio listeners, I've got Henderson in goal, Porro, who's obviously playing tonight for us, but by the time you're watching and listening, he would have already played. Fingers crossed for a clean sheet there. I've got Gabriel and Trent both with the clean sheets. A midfield of Nkunku and Eze. They didn't do particularly well, but then I made it up with Saka, Salah captain for a massive 28, Jota, and then a front 2 of Solanke and Isak. So that got me 72 points with Porro and Solanke to play. I'm probably expecting blanks from both Porro and Solanke, but it is a decent opening fixture. So if that can push me above 80, my idea here is I know I'm in for a lot of pain in game week 2 when I don't have Erling Haaland, right? But I'm hopeful that I've made up enough points in game week 1. And even then after game week 2, this isn't a 2-game week team. We're looking at least till a game week 4, 5. And in game week 5, I prefer Salah captain. So then Haaland owners that don't have Salah are going to then be scrambling to get Salah in game week 5. So I honestly you can't assess how good your season's been until game week 38. But this first team, we're probably talking game week 4, 5, 6. We'll get a bit of an idea about how well we started, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're in a great spot because you always expect, when people go against Haaland, you're not expecting Haaland to blank every game.
No, exactly.
You're expecting limited damage and your other players to make up. And that's exactly what your team's done. So I think after game week 2, while this week everyone will say, okay, I've got Haaland at Ipswich. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.
But then game week 3, like you said, people will want Salah, or game week 4 for sure.
Yep.
And then they'll probably be selling Haaland. So you'll be 2 transfers ahead because you'll already have a Salah.
This is it. And I think game week 1 I couldn't have imagined it going as well as it did. But I never expect Haaland to blank. And some people can't understand. I'm like, I expect Haaland to return every week. And they're like, well, then why don't you have him? And it's, well, I expect my players to also return and obviously outscore them overall. So let's see. If Haaland does score 1 or 2 goals, I'm extremely happy with how my team's gone. And if Salah can match him or outscore him, great. I think if it starts to get into 3+ territory and Salah gets a blank or one return, then yeah, I'm in for a lot of pain. And obviously that's why you've gone with Salah and Haaland, because you don't have that stress of not owning one of them that absolutely smashes it.
Exactly. Well, Saka did that anyway. But you just can't have them all this
Exactly. Yeah, you can't own them all. And your team's not going to look perfect on paper every week. So that's how our teams did. But now we're going to just go through. I thought this would be useful to do. Let us know what you think of the format, by the way. I'm happy to change and adapt these. I want this to be the best podcast out there. So the idea is just going to be go through fixture by fixture and just talk about some eye test and data-related things that we've seen from the fixtures, players that have stood out. And I've also got a few of your questions noted down around players that you either own or don't own and whether you should buy or sell them. So we are both Manchester United fans, and we started the game week with 3 points and a 1-0 win. So I'll just throw it over to you. What did you make of Man United's performance? Were you impressed? Any players that stood out from an FPL perspective?
Yes. I think from a performance perspective, much better. I mean, it's a home game against Fulham, so you'd think that we should have won.
Yeah.
But I think what was nice was not a lot of shots conceded, which was a problem last season. Casemiro looks better. We don't know how long that'll last, whether a number 6 is needed or not. But then Menu, and then, you had Mount there as well, and Bruno false 9. So I think from a game perspective, Bruno at false 9 was incredible. He got 2 amazing chances in the first half. Probably should have scored 1, if not both.
Yeah, Leno was unbelievable, exactly. But he did miss. But he has a tendency to do this. He'll score an absolute screamer and then miss those big chances.
Exactly. And then, you had Ahmad on the right, and who I call our new Maserati on the right as the right-sided defender.
Yep.
And they interplayed reasonably well. But what that meant was Ahmad was actually holding the width.
Yep.
And so I'm interested to see what happens when Garnacho starts. And so that's one of the dynamics that I found interesting. Rashford is still looking rusty, but we'll see where that goes. Overall, from an FPL point of view, I think Bruno's fantastic.
Yep.
Xerxes will take more minutes up top. He'll play in the number 9. And so once that happens, then the Bruno interplay will matter. Because I do think Xerxes is so good with holding up play, a bit like Haaland.
Yep.
And so the wingers will come back into it when he starts. And so you saw that a little bit in the second half as well, where Bruno wasn't as influential as he was in the first half, but I think it's still a great pick. Defense is still, let's wait and see.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, lots of people, he's one of the most transferred in players for Mazraoui. I was very impressed from a footballing perspective, and I do think he'll mop up a lot of bonus because he did a lot of the interceptions, tackles, forward passes, fouls won. So I do think he will be good for bonus, but I didn't necessarily watch that game and think he's going to get me lots of attacking returns because, as you say, he was drifting centrally and he was still... Whilst he was getting into almost like that right 8 position, which is like right central midfield, he didn't often get into that final third in the position where you would expect goals and assists from him. So I'm not saying he's a bad pick at 4.5, but I wouldn't necessarily rush out and do it. And also one game, Man United could go and now lose 3 games and we would not be surprised at all. But I agree. My big take home, I've just put Bruno as a monster. Yeah. I know people don't like United and I know they don't like Bruno, but getting 2 big chances like that and playing essentially as a number 9, I think Xerxes will get a lot of minutes now based on that performance, but I could imagine that it will be them almost interchanging as the 9. So almost like dual 10s where one of them goes forward and one of them plays a little bit more of a deeper role because Xerxes is at most a 9.5, right? Yes, he's not an out-and-out forward at all. So
correct.
What about Ahmad then? So you said he played a little bit wider. Would you be worried if you had Ahmad based on how wide he was, or do you think it was kind of like Salah's wide but still gets opportunities?
No, I think worried is not the right word because he's also minutes risk. So I think when you went for an Ahmad, it was always a 1-2 week punt.
Yeah.
A bit like a Murphy. There were a few like this, like, Oscar Bob was there as well.
Yep.
And so with Ahmad, I mean, the bigger issue is Garnacho's going to come back soon. So that's one of the problems. And I think he will get minutes, but he's not going to start for you. And Man United's fixtures now over the next 2 or 3 aren't the best. They get better later. So I think Ahmad, it's not a panic sell because of his price, but I think eventually he's not going to be the long stay in the team.
I would agree with that. I would almost be worried about game week 2 already. I don't know that he definitely starts game week 2. And then beyond that, obviously the fixtures aren't perfect every single week. I think if you've chosen Ahmad expecting him to start every week, it's probably a game week 3 switch to Rodgers or something like that.
Yes.
Where I think you'll get a lot more minutes, but maybe you hold him for game week 2. But hopefully you've picked a squad where Ahmad isn't a regular starter for you and he's just that 8th attacker. So the other team was Fulham, who a lot of us have invested in. How many do you have from Fulham? Do you have 3 in your team?
I have 2.
2, okay. Who do you have in your team, remind me?
I have Smith Rowe and have Robinson.
Okay, perfect. And how did you feel those 2 performed?
So, this will be a theme with Chelsea as well, where you can't judge them based on when they play a much tougher opponent. So I think similar for Fulham. I mean, they held their own to a reasonable extent, although, like we said, Man United should have scored a couple of times in the first half. Robinson, very happy with the pick. I benched him this week, although he has come on for Barco. So, he was on for 2 bonus, I think, while they were holding a clean sheet. So that attacking threat is there. The Fulham's defense is okay. Without Paulinho, people were thinking, what will happen? They're fine. I think with Smith Rowe, a little bit more, I guess, concerned because he played with Andreas, right? Because Andreas is usually the number 10. So the question was, is Andreas going to be the pivot and ESR plays as the 10? I think in this game, maybe, again, because it's Man United, he was tracking back a lot more. In fact, Andreas had more touches in the final third than ESR. So that makes me worried. Is ESR going to take a more holding role? Not a holding role, but almost like a pivot role. I guess when they play Leicester at home, that won't be the case. So I'm not that worried.
Yeah, I think they basically almost matched each other on the left and right. So they were playing either as dual 8s or dual 10s. But at one point, Smith Rowe dropped in between the centre-backs and Andreas was playing up there. But I think for the most part, I would call it like a between an 8 and a 10, right? He wasn't quite a number 10, but I also don't think he was as deep as being in the pivot. I saw some promising signs, but it was as we expected. He's building up his fitness. It's a new team, and he's not just going to hit the ground running and score hat-tricks every week. And again, hopefully you weren't expecting that when you put him in your team if you did. Someone else I was actually really impressed with was Adama Traore.
Yeah.
But probably not the perfect saying, but all fart, no poo. Kind of, you get that vibe from him, right?
Always been the case.
Exactly. And the runs that he went on and the ability he has to manipulate the ball and get past people is genuinely some of the best that I've ever seen in the Premier League. It's incredible. Do you think he's an option at 5 mil? I mean, I didn't realize how cheap he was, but if you've got Ahmad or you don't want to go for Rodgers, is Traore an option to you, or would you rather try and find the extra money to go 5.5?
I would just go up to 5. I mean, they're in the market for another winger, whether that's right side or left sided. So it's another Ahmad. You don't want to create that this early on. You could do it, but it's only a 0.5, right? If he was 5 million and the others are 6.5, then you can still think about it. I just still think that Smith Rowe is a great pick. I think Muniz is a great pick because with Smith Rowe as an owner, just to finish that, I was glad he was taken off on the 63rd minute because
puts people off.
Well, that, and I was just worried that he gets injured.
Of course,
he's my game week 1 pick, and I've benched him. I don't want him this week. I want him for the Leicester home and the Southampton game. And so I was like, okay, just take your preseason minutes, get back into full fitness, and then get 70 minutes, 80 minutes next week.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, you're not choosing Smith Rowe for that United game. Obviously, it would have been nice if you started him to get something, but look longer term. And I think that's going to be a common theme throughout this pod is don't panic, don't overreact to 1 game week. Absolutely.
Yes.
So the next game, Liverpool Ipswich. So I watched this as a Salah captainer, Jota owner, and Trent owner. So I triple Liverpool, a massive amount of my budget invested. That first half, I was panicking. I was thinking, I've chosen to go without Haaland. I've chosen to captain Salah. I've put loads of my money into Jota and Trent. And Ipswich were brilliant. I'll be honest. I think, as Slot said, they won lots of duels. They created problems, and they could have scored goals in that first half. And then I don't know what Slot did to them at half-time, but something happened, and Liverpool were exceptional. So I've got some stats here. Liverpool had the most shots in the box at 13 in game week 1, despite struggling a little bit in that first half, and the most big chances at 6. So I'll throw this to you. Do you think this is a combination of Liverpool being really strong again and Ipswich being a defence that, despite at points maybe impressing, they will leak goals, or is it one or the other? Is it just Liverpool's amazing? Because obviously next City play against Ipswich.
Right.
So are we expecting City to go and do that now, or was this just a brilliant performance from Liverpool?
Look, I think with these games, one of the things when we look at sort of the data first half, second half, when you unlock it, when you break the defense, then suddenly the plan changes, right? Because you can't, that press, then there's a different intention. Now we want to not only just press, we want to take the ball forward, we want to move guys forward so that, we can attack, we need to equalize, and that opens up more spaces. So I think Liverpool just found a way where instead of passing through the very good press that Ipswich had, they're going to basically, somehow circumvented by either a long ball up to Salah, not a long ball, but basically a direct ball to Salah. And that was the key that unlocked it. And once that happened once, then now it's more open spaces. So Jota enjoyed it, Salah enjoyed it a lot more, Trent loved it. And so it just opened. Now against City, if it stays 0-0 to the 60th, 65th minute, it could equally just be a 1-0.
Yep.
But if that goal comes in the 5th minute, then it could equally be a 6-0.
Yeah, game state, right? Exactly. It depends, absolutely, because the longer that a team that are expected to lose or the weaker team can keep it at 0-0 or get the first goal, it does. I mean, football is so psychological that we are talking about humans. I think sometimes because we love spreadsheets and data and we watch highlights, these are 11 versus 11 humans. So these things have a massive impact on the way that the game goes. And I agree. I think the longer that went on, Ipswich were growing into the game. They probably didn't want half-time to come. That was awful for them, but perfect for Liverpool. Yeah. The other stats that I thought were interesting, Trent had by far and away in game week 1, obviously, like I said, ignoring the Leicester Spurs game because that's not yet happened, had comfortably the highest expected assist. So was creating chances left, right and centre. He actually accumulated exactly 1 expected assist, which might not sound like a lot, but in a single game, that's almost unheard of, considering the next closest was Minte, who we'll discuss in a bit, at 0.65. So yeah, I found it incredibly interesting that Trent managed to do so much in that game. And Jota as well had a good few chances as well. So himself, I think, will be a really good option in terms of goal threat overall. The big question for us is probably going to be around Quansah. Yeah. So Quansah was hooked at half-time. Now, the quotes that are going around, I think, are slightly misleading. Slot didn't say Quansah was hooked because he wasn't winning enough duels. He said that he made the change at halftime to remove Quansah and bring on Konate, and he gave some very specific instructions because Liverpool were not being aggressive enough and they were not winning enough duels. Of course, if he's taken Quansah off, he is highlighting that Quansah was losing some duels. But I actually thought, apart from the fact that there were a couple of duels that he lost, Quansah was actually relatively impressive. Yeah. He gave the ball away a couple of times, but he made some excellent tackles, and I thought at half-time, I was like, it's got to be Van Dijk's injured or something, because Quansah looked good, but it was him that came off. So what do you think about Quansah? If you owned him, would you be looking to transfer out immediately? Would you feel comfortable starting him in game week 2, or is it a situation where you would just start whoever's on your bench instead?
So first thing to say is Slot seems like an honest manager. Maybe that'll change. When Ange started as well, he was very honest, and then he changed as well, where he became vague about Richarlison's injury and stuff. So I think the first thing is that Slot's come out and he's being honest.
It was refreshing almost, wasn't it, to hear that?
So the first thing for Quansah owners is wait for the press conference on Friday, because he could be honest again. He could come out and say, look, we're going to give him another go. It wasn't him. We improved and we'll take it from there. So don't take him out yet. The second thing is, I think it was always a risk because, we look at preseason and we say this guy looks nailed, or we saw this article in the Anfield Wrap which said, he's going to be the first choice because he's not been impressed by Konate. He never said that. Yeah. So this was always going to be a risk. And so it's always team dependent. If you think on Friday you're still not clear and you have a Barco as well in your team and you're having to play let's say, Quansah away to Arsenal or home to Arsenal, then maybe make a transfer, because it's not like we have to be so picky. We do have a free transfer. Yep. At the same time, being patient, I think, is the way to go. Okay.
If people can't be patient because they don't want to, or they've got a Barco and a Johnson sat there and they're like, I need a defender this week, is there anyone that stands out to you at 4.5 that you would say is definitely something you'd look to bring in?
I think Newcastle defense didn't look great. We'll talk about it, but they kept a clean sheet. So Lewis Hall now, because of Shear's red card, probably plays the next 3 because Burn has to fill in. Even if they sign a Gahey, they will still need somebody else, and then Hall still plays. So that's a decent option. I think Rico Lewis, again, we'll talk about, for Man City, was amazingly attacking. I mean, if Guardiola did what Rico Lewis did in this match, people would be breaking their teams to get Guardiola.
Absolutely, yep.
So Rico Lewis looks good, but again, short term.
Yep.
Depends on your wildcard horizon. Depends on who else you have. If you can afford to bench him later, if he gets benched. I think those are the two that stood out immediately. Konza, the one with the K, becomes an option from next week because he has good fixtures after Arsenal.
Yeah. I guess Robinson if they don't own him, but I know a lot of people do.
Robinson would have been the answer as well.
Robinson, Leicester and Ipswich in the next two. We're not expecting... I mean, Fulham conceded a lot of chances to Manchester United. They were 14th for expected goals conceded last season. So then by no means an elite defence, but he gets forward so much that I could imagine him doing fairly well. So yeah, I would agree. I think for me, probably short-term punt on Rico Lewis could be tasty for Ipswich. Let's see what Pep says around whether Walker's available and whether he'll come back in. Or yeah, Robinson for me. So Liverpool, very impressive overall. And I'm delighted that I have three of them. And I would absolutely have your eye on Jota, Trent if you don't have him. And Salah, I think if you've gone without, you continue to go without. But around game week 4, I think they've got Forest, and then game week 5, Bournemouth. And I think in game week 5, he is comfortably the best captain when I've looked ahead. So
correct.
I think if you don't own Salah now, don't panic right this second. But around 4 or 5, you do probably want to have a route to him.
But 5, Arsenal play City. So,
perfect. So that's your route. Sell Haaland, bring in Salah.
Sell Haaland, bring in, or Haaland, Saka for something like that. I think it'll be popular. People don't know it yet, but you'll have Salah in your team by game week 5.
That's what I like to hear. Okay, so another team that were incredibly impressive and another similar result. So Arsenal 2, Wolves 0. I said this is the most incredibly predictable result. If you'd asked me to predict every single result, I would have said Arsenal 2-0 like that, maybe 3-0, but you just knew they were going to score goals and they were going to dominate that game. Am I right in saying you don't have any Arsenal?
I have no Arsenal.
So I'm going to throw the question straight to you before we discuss the game. What was the thinking? Was it just you didn't like those early fixtures or you liked the plays that you could go for instead? What was the reason for no Arsenal defence, no Saka?
I'm very high on Arsenal. I love the Arsenal defence. I love Saka. It's just a fixtures play. First 5 weeks, they have 3 away games. Villa, Spurs, Man City.
Yep.
This was the game that I was basically dreading.
Yep.
And so they did what I expected them to do. But I'm hoping that over the next 4, when they have 3 away games, that maybe they concede in 2 of them. I hope.
Yep. So I guess this is a point. You're not going into game week 1 expecting Arsenal assets to all blank against Wolves, but you're playing this across a 5-game week horizon.
Correct.
So I guess the panic starts to set in if they beat Villa 3-0. And they look incredibly strong defensively and Saka looks good. And then they go into the Spurs game and then do the same thing. So I guess we wait and see. But you do need to play the fixtures in FPL. I took a calculated risk that they would do well enough in this surrounding fixtures. And then maybe one of those away games, we just see a masterclass.
Yeah.
But I think it was absolutely viable to go without. But Arsenal defence do scare me. They only conceded 0.4 XG, but they did concede a big chance. And Raya made 3 very, very good saves in that game. And I think if Raya wasn't on it, we're looking at Arsenal 2-1 and we're saying, see, this is why you didn't go with Arsenal defence because even in their good fixture they've conceded. Now they've got 3 away games. What did you make of Arsenal overall?
So actually, it's the same result as Liverpool. But if you look at the underlying data, it was way not as good, not way worse, but not as good because they didn't create as many chances as Liverpool. They conceded a few, there were a few errors that didn't lead to big chances for Liverpool. And so I think Arteta will fix that. I think it's game week 1 rustiness. It's a home game. We all knew they will win comfortably. But I do think Arsenal defense, it's basically the old Man City defense with a better keeper. I really feel.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So even if they do make the odd mistake, Raya will bail them out, where Edison would tend to concede that chance.
Yep.
So, Arsenal will continue to be really, really good. But I think the real dilemma this season will be which Arsenal. Because you could go double attack, you could go triple defense, and none of it is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we all talk about how good the Arsenal defence is, but they create a lot of chances. And you could comfortably see a Havertz, Saka with one defender working.
Yeah.
It got to that point at the back end of last season, and I wasn't having my best season. And I managed to recover because I went for double attack rather than double defence because double defence was so template.
Right.
So if they continue to defend well, it will get to a point where, again, having one Arsenal defender isn't enough. And at that stage, maybe you do back against it. And Havertz actually had the most shots in the box in game week 1 with 5. The only other player that managed to get close to that was Soucek, who also got 5. We'll discuss in a bit because that is reminiscent to 2022,
right?
When Soucek was absolutely unbelievable for a cheap price. But is Havertz one of those players where we've just completely overlooked him because we're worried about minutes, or do you think we were correct to be hesitant on him?
Well, it's the fact that he's a forward. I mean, he's rightly classified as a forward, but the fact that we have about 6 good forwards this year, especially starting out.
Yep.
So I think people who have avoided have done it. It's justified, but people who don't have Haaland, not only were they able to spread the budget, they actually had an extra forward slot, which is not everybody ended up with Havertz, but I know a few teams out there, Andy Martin, who do have Havertz. So it does make sense. It does open up that slot as well, but there is no right answer this year. Everything's priced in a way where you will feel FOMO with a lot of picks, but you just cannot own them all.
That's absolutely right. And I mean, in my team, I've got Solanke and Isak. Again, haven't seen how Solanke performs, if he even starts against Leicester. I am eyeing up one of those two at some point. I don't have a week in mind, but at some point, one of those I think will become Havertz if I don't wildcard in game week 6. But a game week 6 wildcard, I can almost guarantee Havertz is going to be 50+% amongst engaged managers, because Leicester and Southampton in game week 6 and 7 at home.
See, you say that, but like I still don't think I'll have him.
But do you think you go double defense?
I'll go double defense.
Yeah, there we go. But I suppose this kind of tells us the managers we are, right? You're quite conservative and logical, where I'm like, 2 Arsenal attackers seems great, and I want to chase the upside.
But I'll tell you what, I mean, we're obviously talking 5 weeks early, and we'll see. But when I will get double defense, I will not touch it probably for the rest of the season.
Yeah,
unless someone's injured.
You did that last season though, right?
I had them since game week 10 wildcard. I had both defenders.
It's crazy, the whole season. And that's probably why you did well, because I went without any for a few weeks, and then I only had one, and it's that stubbornness of surely they can't keep getting clean sheets,
right.
But they will.
Yeah.
That's what this large sample tells us. And if they continue to start the season strong with the tricky fixtures, as you said, I don't think it's going to be will you own 3 Arsenal, it's which three Arsenal will you have. Exactly. Absolutely. So a brilliant performance from them in game week 1. And to say that was underwhelming or not great, and they comfortably won 2-0 kind of tells us everything we need to know. And I mean, question to you, without upsetting Arsenal and City fans too much, do you see Arsenal winning the league this year, or do you still think that City have too much?
I think there is an overwhelming consensus moving towards this might be Arsenal's year.
This might be their year, finally.
It's a combination of things, right? It's now, they've had a couple of years of taking it close, so they have that experience, and City getting bored. Like, as Man United fans, we remember...
Finding that motivation to continue performing year after year is not easy.
Alex Ferguson's main thing was, I need to motivate them for next year, because winning 3 times in a row, 4 times in a row is not easy.
Yep, I agree with that. Cool. Right, another... not surprise performance, because I expected Brighton to beat Everton, but so convincingly. I mean, it could have been 4-0, they had a goal disallowed, but 3-0 to Brighton, and that's at Goodison Park. So a fortress last season for large spells. I did find it interesting, though, because I looked into the data, and Everton were actually the 7th best defence in the league last season for expected goals conceded. Pickford is an exceptionally good goalkeeper, so that's a large reason for it, and Branthwaite is brilliant too. But the data suggested that they were good, but not, I think they were 2nd or 3rd for clean sheets. It didn't suggest they were quite that good. Interesting, I did think when I only watched Match of the Day for this, but Brighton did seem to struggle in the opening 20. I think Dwight McNeil missed an open goal at one point. And obviously we speak about game state. Everton scored the first goal in that game. Might have a different story altogether, but without Branthwaite there, and with this data that he said was good but not excellent last year, do we think Everton might regress slightly, or would you think that was just a one-off, and once Branthwaite comes back in, we'll expect Dyche Ball to be really strong again?
I think regardless of Branthwaite, I just expect Dyche to figure it out and get them working. So whether they're elite, I think last year they were very good. Like you mentioned, top 8. It's not elite, but you'd still expect a trickle of clean sheets once every 3 games, maybe 8 or 10 over the season, which is actually fine for a team like Everton. And I think they'll be fine. There will be pockets to pick their players at some point, but not now. And I'm always happy when Pickford concedes, because he really, he was my nemesis last season.
I didn't have Everton defence at any point last season. My mini league rival, which is my brother-in-law, he had double Everton defence all season, was playing him against like Man City, Arsenal, and they just kept getting clean sheets. And it was just so frustrating. But
Exactly. And especially when I had Pickford for first 10 weeks and he kept
I remember.
one.
That was painful. Dyche never, or very rarely, gets battered 2 games in a row. He finds a way he'll analyze and he'll find a way to not concede so many chances. So I think there will be regression from Everton defensively this season, but I don't expect it to be like this every week. But no disrespect to Brighton, because I think a large part of that was Brighton were absolutely excellent, and there's lots to break apart with Brighton, because we own some of their assets, we're looking at some of them. So I'll start with Barco, because you started Barco in your team. He didn't feature at all, which meant Robinson came in for you. What do you make of Barco? And why was he benched? Have you got any theories? And are you worried having him in your team now?
Why I started him is because basically this was the 1 week I was rotating him with Robinson, and this is the 1 week I wanted him. Now I don't need him. So this was my theory. So now I don't need Barco. I'm not going to move him. He can price drop. I don't care. So that's my thinking. But that's because my other 4 defenders are reasonably good and they rotate, and as long as they're fit, they should be all right. But Barco itself, I mean, it's one of those things where we looked at preseason and we said, this guy is
carried
on
away.
set pieces. I can just imagine a dunk header from a Barco cross or Welbeck header. And so, 4.0, we always go there. And so that's fine. I think if you're falling for a trap that's 4 million, that's okay. It's better than a trap for like 8 million or whatever. So I'm not worried in that sense. There's a price drop. If he comes back in the team, I wasn't going to play him in the next two anyway.
Yep.
It's Man United and I think it's Arsenal.
Yep.
So then after that is when it gets interesting. We'll see. If Stupinan is back, I was anyway expecting him to become a dead asset by game week 3. So it's a shame that I missed out on this clean sheet, which was a lucky clean sheet. Like you said, there was an open goal. They also should have got a pen.
Yep.
But I think you just leave him now.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there was rumours going around like a week ago a week before game week 1 that Barco had a slight muscle injury. So there are suggestions that it could just be that he's fit enough to be on the bench if they need him, but probably not to start. Right. And if that's the case, it could be by game week 2 or 3 or 4 that he is just back in the team. And before game week 1 started, people were saying that maybe Barco is good enough to keep Estepinian out of the squad. So it could be that he's fine. And I think unless you are in a position where you've chosen like 3-4 million defenders and you have to start a really suboptimal defender each week if Barco doesn't feature, tuck him on your bench, because by game week 4, I think they have Ipswich at home. If he's back in the starting 11 then, on set pieces still, and Brighton looked very good, then he could be a fantastic option. So I would avoid selling Barco unless you absolutely have to.
Agreed.
If you do want to, I think Greaves stood out to me at 4 million. He was on the end of a lot of set pieces against Liverpool. He looks relatively nailed. Johnson should start now. I think, based on the fact that, is it Burns went off injured?
Correct. And he went off injured, hamstring issue, but we don't know if that is sort of long-term or not. But it does feel like Johnson, I mean, and speaking to all the Ipswich fans, they feel he will come back, especially in the easier games.
Yeah, I think they played a back 4 against Liverpool, but they might play more of an attacking back 5 with Leif Davis and Johnson on the sort of wing-back role. So it might be that in the fixtures where you actually want Johnson, you get him. But I think for the safety, and also he looked very good getting on the intercept pieces, I'd probably look at Greaves at 4 million. But I don't think you want to be using a valuable transfer right now on taking out a £4 million defender.
Correct. Leif Davis, by the way, incredible. We knew that.
Yeah.
The most touches in the final third of any Ipswich player was Leif Davis.
Crazy. And that was him in a more defensive role.
Exactly.
He's going to be absolutely brilliant at points this season. I think from a ground game week 3 or 4 Ipswich's fixtures really improve. He's someone that I'd be eyeing up. If you're looking to bring in someone to replace Quansah, by the way, and you don't need them now, Leif Davis, I think, will be a good shout. Another player that you own that I would be extremely frustrated if there was a 3-0 game that he didn't get anything in is João Pedro. What do you make of his performance? Are you worried at all? Or are you still happy you have him based on that?
Happy I'm having. I mean, we can't control returns. We can control minutes and we can control the team, as in which team you select the player from. So I think, Brighton looked good. He just didn't get at the end of some of the chances. Another game he will. So I think I'm not worried. And he's on pens. So, hopefully he keeps the minutes, because they do keep signing a player every week.
They do, turning into Chelsea slowly.
But, when a team does so well, the manager tends to stick with those players. So I'm happy from that perspective.
And his minutes were much better than I thought they would be actually in game week 1. I thought it was going to be a classic 62nd, 63rd minute he comes off. He got around 80 minutes, didn't he?
So he only played 45 minutes all pre-season. So getting 80 minutes immediately was actually a bonus.
And when they're already winning quite comfortably for him to stay on the pitch, I think João Pedro looks like a really nice pickup. Obviously now you've got United and Arsenal. So I think if you don't own him, he's not someone you look to bring until game week 4. But I think if you do own him, you need to start him in the next 2. Man United will concede chances. We always do.
I'm playing him, I mean, you will see my team, but it's only the Arsenal game where I'm not touching any players. Playing Arsenal and Man City, you don't need to play players.
Next question. Are we overlooking Welbeck? I mean, Danny Welbeck, it seems at some point in every season, Danny Welbeck just pops up with a couple of returns. One of my top comments when I asked for questions for this video is, are we overlooking Welbeck? So are we?
I mean, they have signed Rutter, right, from Leeds. So the expectation is that João Pedro moves up top, but that's an expectation. If Welbeck keeps scoring, then maybe Rutter is the one who plays with Welbeck. So it's just very hard to recommend a player just based on one game, because looking forward, the minutes risk still exists. He's still, injury prone, so I just can't recommend him.
Yeah, I think he's one I'll assess over the coming weeks. But 2 players that I'm probably more interested in is actually Matoma and Minte. So Matoma has the highest XG of any player in game week 1, which is incredible. And Minte had the second highest expected assist despite that early sub. They both looked extremely impressive, and we thought that might be the case. And whilst there are a lot of players that can play in those positions, and once Solly marches back, that is absolutely a rotation risk for Minte. They were extremely impressive. I think they'll both get a lot of attacking returns. Is it just a wait and see until game week 4? Is there any... Let's say you've got an Nkunku, who we'll discuss in a bit. Is there any situation in which you would move to a Brighton asset now, or do you think if you don't already have them, you have to wait for the fixtures?
I think it's. I mean, firstly, Minte came off for that concussion, which we think he should be okay for the Man United game anyway. But still, I mean, there's no need to go for him, especially like him. He's not going to price rise. There's a flag on his icon, and Mitoma especially. You can wait. 6.5 is a lot of money that you want to think about. See another couple of games because what happens after game week 1 is other managers are also looking at this. Man United is also looking at this. The first thing they'll say is we need to cover their attacks are coming from the wings. So they will do the same. So we need to see how they adapt to that. So I think it's a little bit early to jump, especially because of the 2 difficult fixtures.
Perfect. Okay, Newcastle, Southampton. This is such a difficult one to try and analyse because I think Southampton were Ipswich, incredibly impressive. And I hope Leicester are tonight as well because that will be exciting if the 3 promoted teams actually give it a proper go.
Right.
But yeah, so firstly, before we even talk about the saying off, Southampton were very impressive from the first whistle. But that obviously changes the game that early. And we're talking about that early red card, I should say. And we talk about game state. That's a massive thing to happen to go down to 10 men. But I do want to make it clear that I think Southampton are a team that will absolutely give it a go against the teams that they face. Armstrong had 4 shots in the box that game. He was probably unlucky not to come away with anything. And I think he looks like a very shrewd pickup at 5-5. Probably safer for minutes than João Pedro. Also, we believe on penalties, Brereton Diaz could take them. But in general, I was very impressed with Southampton. Whether that was a red card or not, I mean, I don't think so. Brereton Diaz obviously made the most of it. And I think Cher was very naive. But I don't think most people would think that that's a red card in any world.
I didn't even see the head.
Was there a movement? It was the most subtle movement forward like this, but yeah,
that was gravity.
But it's silly from Cher. As much as that is not a red card, you can't experienced players can't put their head to another player's head. It just is something that you just don't do anymore. So, I mean, he has himself to blame, but that then made it incredibly difficult for Newcastle. I want to give a massive heartfelt apology and shout out to Murphy owners because how unlucky can you get? You pick a player that you correctly predict starts, has been incredible in pre-season, and probably would have had chances in that second half, and then he gets subbed early because someone else gets sent off. I mean, that is classic FPL, but I'd be pretty happy if I had Murphy now because he did start, and technically he got a rest now, so he should be feeling good for game week 2. So I would expect Murphy to start again in game week 2, but it's a shame that the banker fixture that you felt was there was the first one. So, yeah, what did you think of the game? I mean, you captained Isak over Salah.
Yeah.
Do you feel quite hard done by, or do you think it was a game where you maybe weren't expecting, based on the first sort of 10 to 15 minutes, maybe Newcastle, even if they were 11 versus 11, might not have got anything?
I think Newcastle would have scored 3 goals here.
You think?
I mean,
we saw it with Liverpool, I suppose. Start the game slowly and then they build into it. So maybe Newcastle would have done that.
They would have probably done that. And the problem with the red card, it's not just losing the numbers, right? You lose a winger. You lose a good centre-back who passes out from the back. Now, Gordon is almost like playing up top with Isak, which is not good because Gordon needs the space on the side. And so Murphy's not keeping side width on the other side. It just ruins the whole game plan. And so, yeah, I mean, they're happy with the 1-0, but it should have been a 3-0. So people, 3-1 maybe is a more fair estimation of my estimation of how the game would have felt. And I had a triple if I had Gordon as well. I'm not Gordon's biggest fan, and I know a lot of people are. I always feel, in the pecking order, I feel Eze is better, Jota is better. I went with Gordon because these Eze rumors. And so the skeptical me is watching Gordon, and I'm going, I don't know why people like this guy. So I think they could have done more.
I think we both thought Gordon didn't do much, but as you say, he almost had to play as a second striker because you can't have a left winger, a forward, and no right winger.
Correct.
So Isak had to shift a little bit, Gordon had to shift a little bit. So I think very unlucky if you captained Isak, very unlucky if you had Gordon, and extremely unlucky if you had Murphy. Just to reiterate, Hall I don't think was very good.
Yeah.
And in fact, having heard from some Newcastle fans, they also don't think he was particularly good. There is a 5% chance that actually Kelly plays at left back, but I still think Hall is pretty nailed on. And as Pras said at the start, because Fabian Cher has been sent off, Burn has to play at centre back now. You then have, if Gay wants to come in, he can play there. Or they could play Kelly as well if they want to, left footers, or they've got Krath. But it makes Hall even more likely to start at left back. So if I owned Hall now, I'd start him. I'd feel happy having him. But just be aware that there is a small chance he gets dropped, and he wasn't overly impressive in game week 1. I think nothing else to say outside that. But yeah, keep an eye on Southampton because they've got some decent fixtures coming up. And I think the likes of Armstrong, Brereton Diaz, Harwood, Bellis, if you want a cheap option. I think at points this season we could look to Southampton. I was very impressed with their performance.
Agreed.
Forest Bournemouth. I was actually at the City Ground, courtesy of tickets from Soro, and I was actually really disappointed with both teams. But Forest in particular, they had these spells where it was like, yeah, they're starting to string some stuff together. Obviously, Danilo's injury wasn't ideal. I actually thought, though, once Yates come on, he was very, very, very good. arguably Forest's best player. I mean, I haven't watched the highlights back because I was there live, but my impression was that Yates carried the ball very well. He was very impressive. They had these spells where Hudson-Odoi got on the ball and Elanga got on and Olin Aina got forward, and there was parts where it was like, yeah, it's starting to click, but it just never fully clicked. And when you look at the data, they weren't overly impressive. Chris Wood, I thought, was absolutely awful, genuinely.
Yes.
In terms of, he's a bit outside of the goal. He didn't link up the play well. He didn't run in behind because, well, that's not really what he does. His hold-up play was okay at points. But at the City ground, when Chris Wood came off and Awoniyi came on, I've never heard a ground go so crazy. Now, I don't think that was for Chris Wood leaving the pitch. It was that they think Taiwo Awoniyi is a truly special footballer. And I truly think that as well. He went on that crazy run of scoring goals before. Did, yeah. So I wouldn't be too worried if I had Chris Wood right now, but he's not playing 90 minutes every game. Yeah. And outside of a tap-in which his positioning was very good, by the way, he didn't do too much. What was your opinion of it? Because I think you were pretty disappointed in Forest as well.
Yeah, I was. And this is the worry, right? Sometimes we look at fixtures and we say, oh, these guys are top of the ticker for the first 3 game weeks. But it's still Forest, right? I mean, it's still a team that will, give us a 0.51 XG in the game. So who do you want to back? I saw people with double Forest attack.
It's not an attack you want to really load up on too much.
That's the problem. So I think nothing more to add. I think Gibbs White was a little bit disappointing as well. Just one shot.
Barely touched the ball. Yeah, it was really interesting. He was in that number 10 role, but it was Hudson-Odoi and Elanga that got on the ball up, and Yates as well carrying the ball. He just didn't seem to be able to find a way into the game. And maybe we're disrespecting Bournemouth.
Yeah.
Maybe this is just a Bournemouth thing where they did very well. On Bournemouth, it was such a minefield trying to work out who was playing in their attack. When I was live there was Semenyo at one point, then it was Kluivert, then it was Jebison, and all of them were sort of rotating, and maybe that's a good thing. Yeah. But from an FPL perspective, I've got no idea who's going to start up top. They've obviously just signed a new forward from Porto, I believe. Correct. Could potentially be on penalties. I've briefly looked at his data on FP Ref. He looks very good, but I've never watched him play. So maybe a bit of a minefield that you potentially want to avoid. I mean, lots of people had Kluivert because he was supposed to be on pens, didn't even start.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, just a really disappointing game in total for FPL. I mean, Semenyo got the goal, which is great, and Wood got the goal. But in general, I didn't look at any of those players and think, I desperately want them.
Yeah, I would agree. And the fixtures allow for that, so we don't need to rush into their players. I do think it's a case of they have lots of good, cheap assets. Somebody may emerge in the future, so just wait and watch.
Just keep an eye on them, absolutely. West Ham Villa was the next one. I was watching this with my girlfriend who's a Villa fan. And my general consensus, because I wasn't watching it with the volume up particularly loud, I was like, I was not very impressed with Villa. Yeah. Which was interesting because I then said that in my YouTube video yesterday. And all of my comments were like, you don't watch games, you just look at spreadsheets. What an awful opinion. So maybe I was wrong, but I just thought that Villa were very average. I didn't think they were awful, but some players were impressive. Bailey and Rodgers in particular I was extremely impressed with, but I don't feel like they had a massive amount of control. I do think they shipped a lot of chances. Souček had 5 shots in the box. You can't allow Souček 5 shots in the box and tell me that you have been good in that game. So yeah, maybe I'm disrespecting Villa, but the impression that I got when I was watching that is they are carrying across what we saw from pre-season where they just didn't quite get going. Watkins was, I wouldn't say awful, he just didn't do anything. You might as well have not had him on the pitch. When Duran came on, he looked brilliant. So I think that's mainly a fitness issue, and I just think he hadn't got fully up to speed, which is why he had the early sub. Yeah. But I mean, feel free to disagree with me. What did you think of Villa and West Ham in total? Do you think Villa were really good?
So you can have an Arsenal-style opinion that, Villa were a little rusty and Watkins' first minutes of pre-season or actual season that he got. So that was inevitable, but they got a result away to West Ham, which has traditionally not been an easy place for a top 8 team to go away to West Ham. So if you take that opinion, you say, okay, Villa came out with 3 points and not bad at all. And then the other thing is, I feel there are youngsters there that did well. So Rodgers, you talked about, I think he was really, really good. Got 90 minutes. He had, I don't want to say an open goal, but there was no, between him and the goalkeeper, there was no defender and the goalkeeper's on the floor. So he could have easily scored. He scuffed it. But I was very happy looking at that. And Rodgers started off on the left. Then Ramsey came on. McGinn was taken off. So actually Rodgers moved to the number 10 role, which was again very good. And he kept running the whole game. I don't see a world in which he's suddenly not nailed unless they sign somebody. So I think he looks good for minutes. And I think Villa in general, to answer your question, I do think they were a bit rusty. They did give away chances. Kudus was absolutely incredible. He had them on toast.
Special footballer, isn't he?
With the things he does with the ball. He's one of those where he has the ball, it sticks like glue to his feet and he can run and do things. But then there was little end product there. So it was a cross to Souček, a corner to Souček. Yep. That's what ended up happening. It felt like a Moyes West Ham, not a Lopetegui West Ham, but that'll evolve. It's a new manager.
Yeah, I was disappointed with the amount of minutes Bailey got, and maybe that was game state dependent. Maybe it is just something where he needs to build up his minutes, but it was Diaby's left, so I'm expecting Bailey to be the one getting 90, and he was subbed again, I think, around 70, 75 minutes. So that was disappointing for me. And when I watched that game, I didn't at any point think I'd rather have Bailey at 6.5 than Rodgers at 5.
Yeah.
So if we ignore what my opinions are about the actual football there, from an FPL perspective, this made me feel like which is a crazy thing to say because he's 5 million, but I regret not having Rodgers in my team because he now looks like an absolute bargain at 5 mil. I think if you have him, you are absolutely happy starting him from game week 3 onwards.
Yeah.
And for him to, like you say, it's not just the minutes, it's the moving around of positions that regardless of who they were taking off and bringing on and what they were trying to do, Rodgers just stayed on the pitch. Right. So I was really impressed with him. And I think, if you have him, you're feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing with Rodgers is if John McGinn builds up fitness, then if Ramsey comes on, it could be for him. But as long as the players play well. So every player that we're picking, we're learning new things.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could learn another new thing next week, which
Get
is
subbed off at 60 minutes or something like that.
So just with that caveat, but I own him, and it was always the plan that I play him this week, then I don't play him against Arsenal, then he comes back on. But similar to Barco, I had in my mind that if I don't need him, then I'll have João Pedro and Smith Rowe, and I don't need to start him ever again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess another point to add to that is Watkins won't be subbed off very often. Yeah. So if that's one less player that will be subbed off. So maybe we might see some more early subs for Rodgers, but really encouraging signs there. And yeah, do think about Souček. Let's see how he performs in game week 2, 3, 4. But Souček at 5 million could be one that creeps in because he was at points in the past an absolute FPL machine, getting 10s and 15 points for fun.
Yeah, I mean, they got Fulkrug on later on.
Yes.
Obviously, Antonio is not going to be starting there. It was basically getting Fulkrug back up to fitness. So I think he's also a good header of the ball. So I think maybe that's the style of play that they're trying to encourage, where more crosses will come in, which West Ham know how to do.
It's funny that they eventually lost Moyes and they've just replicated early Moyes ball. It's like Fellaini's back. Oh, I do love Fellaini. Right, so the next game was Brentford Palace, obviously onto the Sunday. I was a little disappointed with Palace, but I do also think that, again, game state and certain decisions that we could have been looking at this, Palace could have won this 2 or 3-0 and we would be talking very differently if that genuinely awful refereeing hadn't occurred. And I feel really sorry for, I think it's Sam Barrett, because it's his first Prem game, but that is a huge rookie mistake. He was so, if you hadn't seen, so Crystal Palace got a free kick from about 35 yards out in a crossing position. There's no way anyone should have shot from there. So Sam Barrett, the referee, is fully hyper-focused on what is happening in the box, isn't even looking at Eze. And Eze scores an absolutely beautiful goal where he whips it and catches Flecken out. But because the ref is so hyper-focused on the box, he's not even looked at if Eze's kicked the ball or where he's kicking the ball. As soon as he saw a little foul in the box, he's blown his whistle. And he's blown his whistle before the ball hits the back of the net. Now, because the ref has blown the whistle, VAR can't intervene because technically the players might have responded to the ref blowing the whistle, and maybe if the whistle hadn't gone, Flecken could have got there. But everyone knew in their heart Flecken could have had an extra 2 seconds if he wasn't getting there. And the whistle being blown and the foul in the box and everything had absolutely no impact on the fact that Eze scored that goal. So common sense didn't prevail because common sense would say that that is a goal. So Eze was absolutely robbed, and that was at 0-0. Not only did Eze then get robbed, we lost our FPL points, but Brentford on the very next set of play went on and scored. So this is what we talk about game state. If that goes in, it's 1-0 Palace, and maybe Palace from there go to 2-3-4. But then all of a sudden it's 1-0 Brentford. Brentford gain confidence. Palace feel very shaken. So, yeah, I don't want to discredit Palace, but I also think defensively they gave up a lot more chances than I was expecting, especially when Gay was starting. It was a back three, very strong back three with Richards, Anderson and Gay. So I was a little bit disappointed with them defensively, especially when you look at how good their data has been. I think, didn't you send me the notes to say they've been Brentforded?
Yeah, they've been Brentforded. Yeah, Brentforded is basically...
What do you mean by that?
So if you look at Thomas Frank, he's been on the Monday Night Football a couple of times. His philosophy is we will score we will generate big chances and we will give up no big chances.
Yep.
And that's how a lot of Brentford games are. So they ended up getting a couple of big chances, put them away. And I don't think Crystal Palace got huge chances, and that's how Brentford works. Yep. So it's just always a tough place to go. This is why I was willing to back off the Munoz punt, although he got an assist. But I just think Brentford is a tough place, regardless of who's playing. It's a very system-driven team. Yeah,
Munoz and Mitchell were extremely impressive. So if you don't watch Palace, they essentially are going to play with a back three or a back five. It's much closer to a 3 than a 5. So you've got 3 centre-backs, then you've got Munoz and Mitchell as wing-backs. Mitchell is just someone that will continue to go under the radar because I think Munoz has greater goal threat. I would say that there's a very good chance that Mitchell has a similar, if not more, assists, though, in this season because he gets into similar positions to Munoz, but he just drifts a little less central and he maintains the width, which allows, obviously, Eze to come inside. So I think Mitchell will get a lot of assists from crosses. Munoz was very impressive, though, because he popped up in the box a few times. That's how he got the assist for the goal. And something which I didn't realise, and maybe this was an oversight from me, he took 2 corners as well.
Right.
So he took 2 in-swinging corners. I think Eze only had 1 himself. There was one point where Eze was stood over the corner and he walked away and let Munoz take it. I don't think Munoz will take every corner, but when you've got a 5 million defender playing as essentially a winger, getting in the box, taking corners for a good defence, it feels like a slight oversight for me. And I'm very frustrated because I spoke about in my team selection video a couple of days before the deadline, I've got Henderson and Gabriel, and Raya and Munoz is the same price.
Right.
And this is very hindsighty because Gabriel could have got a return. He could get one in game week 2, but I now look at it and think Raya and Munoz, for the upside that Munoz has, might have been the one. But I guess the justification was Henderson will make saves. Gabriel has the attacking threat. I'd rather the money outfield than in the goalkeeper spot. So let's wait and see if that was a big mistake. But I was extremely impressed with Munoz and Mitchell in the positions they were picking up.
Munoz is going to be a similar issue, not issue, but a debate for us like we had with Havertz, right? There's just so many good other defenders for 0.5 more or a million more, definitely. So we'll be thinking Arsenal defender with limited upside, although they do have some attacking upside, but not like Munoz. I mean, Munoz is a right winger for all intent and purposes, the way he operates. And then obviously you have the Arsenal guys, you have the Trents, the Robos. It's just going to be a difficult season. And we may end up saying he's really good, really attacking, but not own him.
Yeah. Oh, God, I really regret that already. It was only a 4-point swing, I think, in the end. But when I saw Raya get save points and bonus, and I was like, he didn't do that for me once last season. By the way, I went with Raya over Gabriel and Saliba for, it was about 8 game weeks, and he was just getting 6, 2, 6, and Saliba and Gabriel were scoring. But when I saw that and then the Munoz get that assist, I was just like, it's just classic FPL, but there we go.
The 6-pointer and the 2-pointer, Edison and Raya, got 8 points this week, both of them.
Yeah. Ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, what is FPL become? The only other player that I wanted to mention was actually Mbeumo. We did speak about Brentford, but we love him.
Yeah.
He's an absolutely darling of the FPL community. We started with him last season when he got those 2 early penalties. He is on penalties. We would expect now that Tony looks like he's off.
Definitely.
Very talismanic. Excellent data always. Are you eyeing him up now, or is it kind of your game week 6 wildcard you're looking to bring him in?
Game week 6, almost definitely. If Tony has left and they don't sign another penalty taking forward, which Mbeumo is amazing at penalties as well. And if Tony didn't exist, then he'd be on pens. So yes, definitely game week 6, but I'm even open to game week 3.
Okay.
Because
Southampton at home, is it?
Yeah, Southampton at home. Then if you're able to rotate him with another player, so you don't have to play him in 4 and 5, then I think you could even go to game week 3. But I think game week 6 wildcard will be very, very popular.
I don't think either of us believe in someone being fixture proof. It doesn't exist because you play the fixtures, but he does feel like the kind of player where if you had to play him in a tricky fixture, if Brentford score, you're expecting him to be involved in some regard.
Yeah.
I would expect him to be involved in 50% plus of Brentford's goals this season. So if you wanted to pick him up now and you were looking to maybe ship off Nkunku, who we'll discuss in a second, and you had some money to play with, I wouldn't mind moving from Mbeumo right now.
Fair enough. I mean, but if you wanted a playable player, then, Brighton's 3-4-5 are very, very good.
Yeah.
So you could go for a Mitoma instead.
Yeah.
So that would be the consideration, but, it's okay to play Mbeumo as well in the tougher ones.
Yeah, I think it depends on you as a manager. Some people are so fixtures focused and some just disregard them, and either strategy can absolutely work. So the final game of the game week, as of right now, obviously we haven't seen the Spurs-Leicester game, was Chelsea-City. Man City didn't particularly impress me, but I don't know if they needed to. It was one of those, it felt very much like training.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the case in the Community Shield. So I am hesitant to say, well, Man City didn't need to find another gear. Do they have that gear at the moment? I don't know, because they needed that gear against United and it didn't really come at any point. And if United had put away a couple of their chances, they would have won. Chelsea had higher XG than City.
Right.
So Chelsea had their chances. So it's all well and good saying Man City didn't have to do much. They were just in training mode. It was nice and easy. Pep's not going to do that deliberately. So I don't think that the City were like laying off and just letting Chelsea. I think they just struggled a bit to get going. And City do start the season quite slowly, quite often. So are you worried at all? This is me trying to convince myself I don't need Haaland. Do you think City deliberately just didn't find that second, third, fourth gear because they didn't need to? Or do you think there is some rustiness there?
I think there is rustiness. I mean, wasn't there this thing of him giving 4 weeks to every single player?
Yeah.
So everyone's had a nice break.
Yeah.
So they're still in preseason mode.
Yeah.
And that intensity, that 1% makes a huge difference in a Pep style or, modern football as such. So I do think it's a tougher game, and home to Ipswich could be a great game. But you're right that if they underwhelm in the Ipswich game, then you could see people losing focus, losing trust in City players, because suddenly then you look at the fact that, they've got Arsenal coming up in 2-3 weeks. They've got, who do they play in game week 3? West Ham away. So, you would sort of think, okay, I can maybe get rid of a Haaland, get him back on a wild card, get a Salah. Haaland could drop in price.
That would be nice.
if that happens. Now, equally, if they do well and people could go with the opposite and say, oh, I need Foden now because, now Man City are back and they've just hammered Ipswich. So Man City are going to be one of those narratives where people will sort of extrapolate based on Ipswich where they go. I think it's still a good team with a good attack.
Okay, I think that's fair enough. So in terms of players that were of note, Gvardiol still playing deep because Rico Lewis was sensational and he's playing on the right. So as of right now, if Rico Lewis continues to start, Gvardiol does not carry much, if any, attacking threat. He genuinely is basically a centre-back. I was watching for large spells. He's playing basically on the halfway line, and he can still get the odd assist from there. He might bomb forward and get a goal, but you're not going to get attacking returns if Rico Lewis continues to play. Rico Lewis himself is just unbelievable as a footballer, and wow, just impressed in every game I've ever seen him play. But against United and Chelsea in his recent 2 games, I've been incredibly impressed. Now, does he continue to start? I don't think so. I think Pep just loves Walker. I think he trusts Walker. And I think Gvardiol on the left with Walker as right centre-back is arguably a stronger defensive setup. Maybe you lose a little bit having Gvardiol rather than Rico Lewis, but I think you gain because you've got 2 very, very good defenders. No disrespect to Lewis, but he's better going forward. Yep. So I think Gvardiol wouldn't be stressed if I didn't have him. We saw how good he is for bonus points without any attacking returns. And I think sooner rather than later, Walker comes in. Will that be for Ipswich? I don't think so. Yeah. I think Rico Lewis is playing absolutely brilliantly out of his skin. And this isn't a game where they will expect to need Kyle Walker, you wouldn't imagine. So I think Rico Lewis starts again. So if you want to go there, you can. And obviously, I would therefore think Gvardiol is fine, but his upside shouldn't be as high as it would if he was playing on like the left wing.
Correct.
And then I guess attackers. So Savinho was most impressive attacker for me. Shame that he came off injured. It didn't sound great, but we'll have to wait and see for an injury update there. If he is injured, I think that makes it very, very, very likely that Foden and Doku start on the wings. You could play Bernardo Silva out there. If Grealish is available, he might play, but still not got many minutes at all in recent weeks. So for me, this is probably Doku on the right or the left and then Foden on the other wing.
Yeah.
Would you say the same thing?
I would completely agree. I think for Foden, played 45 minutes? Or
45, yeah, he came on at half-time, yeah.
So I think he's ready to start Ipswich. So
that's scary.
That's going to be another, well, how much owned is he? Like 25%?
Yeah, he's owned by like a quarter of the managers.
But people are selling him this week. So they've realized, they shouldn't have picked him. But now actually you should have him. Yeah. So don't sell him if you have him. I think he's now ready to go. And like we had said, so one good and bad. The good is that he will start Ipswich. The bad is a lot of the talk pre-season was he's going to play centrally this year. Because their wingers are dropping like flies.
He's going to have to play wide.
He's going to have to play wide. Yep. Now, he may still be good, but he's just not the player of the season good when he plays in the middle.
Absolutely. So I'm going to discuss Nkunku before we go back to Bernardo Silva and Doku, because I think they could be potential replacements. So you have Nkunku, correct?
I don't.
You don't have Nkunku?
No.
Oh, you lucky man. So put yourself in the position of us who have Nkunku. We've seen him really do very little and then come off quite early. Are we stressing now? Do we remove him? Is it something where... So here's my opinion on it. I think that we won't often see, especially against slightly weaker opposition, Chelsea play Enzo, Lavia and Caicedo. Correct. Because that is 3 relatively defensive midfielders. I know Enzo has the ability to go forward, but largely I would see him as more of a 6 or an 8. He's not a 10 for me. So I think one of the 3 get dropped in easier fixtures, which leaves that 10 role. Palmer does seem to be favoured on the right. So I think Nkunku starts as the 10 against Wolves. But would you be stressed? Would you be removing him? Would you be looking to go to a Doku or a Bernardo or a Matoma or a Burmo?
Absolutely not.
You'd be keeping him?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I mean, like you said, he could play in the 10. He could play instead of Jackson if he plays Dewsbury Hall, right?
Absolutely. Because Jackson wasn't very impressive.
Exactly. I don't own him and people are panicking. I'm somewhat happy that people are panicking, but I was actually thinking that I could get Nkunku in game week 3 or 4 because, the fixtures are great from now on. I mean, people say great. They're great on paper, but maybe don't pan out that way. But he's either playing as striker, as a number 10, or on the left. Yes, he has competition on the left. And by the way, even Dewsbury Hall could play in the 10. So he does have competition in the 10 as well. But he's still a good pick. He's going to get... I think we need to lower our expectations a little bit because there are now enough players at Chelsea that he won't get the 80, 90 minutes, but he's good for 60, 70 minutes. In easier fixtures, there's absolutely no need to panic. I don't think he should be sold at all this week.
Yeah, and he's 6.5 million as well. Like, we're not expecting Palmer returns. And equally, I'd be more worried if I had Palmer because he also blanked, right? So it's not something where I'd be panicking right now. And I think, again, that's the common theme of one game week tells us very, very little. Just because someone scores a hat-trick or blanks doesn't mean that next week they'll repeat exactly that.
Did you see that Athletic? I mean, they were making an assumption based on where Maresca was going, but he was hinting almost that Palmer will also not get the license to do what he was doing last season.
Interesting.
He will play in the zone, which basically Pep used to do with his wingers, right?
Yeah,
You have to stay in your zone. You have to create the width, let the midfielders do their thing. So that's also something very interesting on Palmer. Because I was thinking, as somebody who has Salah, that if I will sell Haaland in game week 3, I'll do it for Palmer and Watkins, something like that.
Yeah.
But if Palmer is going to play out wide, that's something I'm actually monitoring even more than Nkunku, because if you're going for a Palmer, you're not going for a Saka or a Haaland or a Salah. So you need to actually think about Palmer a lot more than Nkunku can just stay, man. Just play for another 2-3 weeks and see where it goes.
That's extremely interesting. Yeah, I did think of Palmer, very lively on the ball, looked sharp, but didn't drift as central, wasn't getting in behind. So yeah, if he becomes a part of a system, 10.5 is probably not worth it at all. Right. So I think we need to see more around Chelsea. The only other thing then is Haaland. I've put only 0.33 XG. He didn't get tons of chances, had a couple, could have scored another goal, absolutely. Right. He doesn't need them at all. Yeah. But I didn't watch that and think that looks like a Haaland that I'm terrified of. And as a result, I think he'll blank against Ipswich.
Agree with everything apart from the last bit.
Okay,
Look, I think with Haaland, a lot of people who went for Haaland are also of the opinion that Chelsea game was bonus, right? I mean, yes, we expected 6-7 points. We got 6-7 points. And so we actually got more. We got 8, I think. So I think that was decent for a Chelsea away fixture. I think most people got him to captain in Ipswich game week 2 and will then move accordingly with 2 free transfers depending on how that goes. And I think it's all fair to do after that.
Yeah, I think we said before we started recording this that Salah drafts should expect to outscore Haaland drafts in game week 1.
Correct.
So I'm happy I did, but I needed it because game week 2 is where Haaland drafts expect to do better. And then from game week 3 onwards, I think it's equal game. So if you have a Haaland draft that hasn't done very well, you're still in a very good position because game week 2 should be a lot of fun for you. Yeah. And it's going to be a big sofa that I'm going to need myself. So those are our opinions on some of those key games. Hopefully that was helpful talking through those players. There were a few questions, we don't need to spend long on it, but around wildcards. There will be lots of people that have already hit the button. So if you've done that, maybe ignore what we're about to say, but what are your thoughts on a game week 2 wildcard if it wasn't planned? We've seen people like James from Planet FPL played a beautiful game week 1 bench boost. He's probably looking at well over 100 points in game week 1, and he's planned a game week 2 wildcard. So it's a different story. But under what conditions would you say a game week 2 wildcard is warranted if it wasn't in your initial plan?
You've been very unlucky with injuries, of which I can't think of many.
It wasn't that many, no.
So I mean, these are the conditions that I would play it, that you've sort of had a thesis and you've been proven wrong because you've had injuries and now your path is ruined. But if you had certain assumptions on certain players, nothing in game week 1 should have changed that fundamentally. Nkunku is a prime example. Nothing in game week 1, according to me. Okay, maybe the minutes. So I would adjust his expected minutes from 78 to maybe 65.
Yep.
But that's about it. So if I think of the big players, Salah did what he did, Haaland did what he did, Saka did what he did, the City defense did well, Liverpool defense did well, Arsenal defense did well. So unless you avoided all of these guys, which I expect no one's listening here has no Arsenal, Liverpool or City, then I think not a lot should have changed. Don't be wildcarding because you went for no Salah or no Haaland or no Saka or no defense, because that stuff changes. Next week, Arsenal could concede and your Lewis Hall or scores, Robinson scores. So I would be patient if you can. Get 2 free transfers into next week, or even make a transfer this week if your team really looks bad, and then see next week with 2 weeks of information rather than 1.
Yeah, I think I would just say if you've made multiple mistakes and you can identify those and you think you are able to fix them with a wildcard, then maybe I would just hesitate. I think if you're someone that's made several mistakes, how much would you trust yourself to not make those mistakes again? But I think if you look at your team now and you had like Trossard and Rodri and all sorts of players that just haven't started, aren't good, then yeah, if you've got several mistakes in your team, and I'm talking 5, 6, 7 key mistakes, that's the only time that I would play a wildcard myself. Because as Pras says, next week, Salah gets sent off, Haaland scores 6 goals, and all of a sudden you've sold Haaland to get to Salah, and you're panicking. So 1 week isn't enough, 2 weeks isn't enough. I think for me, game week 4 wildcard would be about as early as I'd want to go. You said that game week 6 is what you're eyeing up. If you had to give it a percentage in terms of how likely you are as of right now to wildcard in 6, what is that? And have you looked at any other windows, or is it just 6 for now?
No, 4 is an interesting one as well.
Okay.
But the 4 window, meant that you have had to back Arsenal a lot more because they had 2 home games.
And you've got no Arsenal.
I've got no Arsenal. So therefore 4 is a little bit out for me because I'm also happy with my Liverpool. If you're going for a game week 6 wildcard, then you need it because Liverpool's fixtures in specifically 4 and 5 are amazing when Arsenal's and Man City's aren't because they play each other in 5. So therefore, having good Liverpool and not a lot of Man City and Arsenal is a game week 6 wildcard. Now, I'm open to extending it. Let's say I don't need many transfers between now and game week 6. Then I may just make 4 transfers, get a few Arsenal, get a few Man City, and then I'm okay. But I would say 80%, I think I'll be game week 6 wildcard.
Okay. I still think 6 at the moment looks like the best window, but I would say I'm probably 60% just because I haven't specifically planned my team as well as you for a game week 6 wildcard. So I've got that in my mind that if I get there and I want it, I'm fine. But I do have 2 Arsenal, so that's a big part of that. And I think that my team's in a flexible enough position where in game week 5, I don't have to panic to get Salah.
Right.
So I'm kind of hopeful that I might not need it in 6. But if I end up doing so, I'll be happy to play it. Game week 8 looks like a window that I don't mind as much. Again, Liverpool and Newcastle's fixtures start to turn between 6, 7, 8. So that's a nice window. And then always a late wildcard works very well because you get your second wildcard around game week 19 and beyond. If you play your first wildcard between sort of game week 16 and 19, it can help you to delay that second wildcard potentially. So I never hate the idea of playing to not wildcard and just trying to keep it for the long term.
Absolutely fine. I mean, it's like Newcastle play Man City in game week 6. So if you're not so heavy on Newcastle, then you don't need to sort of... But when people like me who've built it, that I'm taking triple Newcastle into Man City in game week 6, I have no Arsenal who are playing home to Leicester, then you've got to do that.
Absolutely. Cool. Right, we're going to do some quick fire questions. There aren't too many, but these are just things where I just want kind of your instinct. So they don't have to be one-word answers, but let's say 5 to 10 seconds on each one, okay? Bernardo Silva or Doku to bring in this week?
I mean, I'll start with neither, but if you have to, then I think Doku just has the upside. Like Bernardo Silva will help back because Rodri isn't back yet.
Okay, perfect. There you go, perfect. Triple captain Haaland in game week 2, yes, no, or maybe?
That actually needs more than 10 seconds, if you'll allow me.
We'll do that at the end. So what's your quick answer?
Quick answer is no.
Okay, no, perfect. 3, sell Quansah or give him one more week?
Sell.
Perfect. Start an Arsenal defender or Robinson if only one? And this is one I need help with.
This is tough, and I would go Robinson.
Perfect. We'll maybe discuss that when we move on to my team. Start Smith Rowe or João Pedro this week?
Smith Rowe.
Smith Rowe, play the fixture.
Yeah.
Keep faith with Watkins or sell until Villa start to improve and he looks fitter.
Watkins is my transfer in game week 3, so keep faith.
Perfect. There we go. You did quite well there. Let's do triple captain Haaland then. So why do you think that needs more discussion?
So what's different this season is, for people who don't know, is we don't have a lot of doubles and blanks because, this game week 29 annoying weekend, which has a lot of blanks. This doesn't happen this time where it coincides with the Premier League.
Perfect.
So there's a separate week for that game week, that quarterfinal FA Cup. So therefore, fewer doubles, and you have only, as things stand, only 2 windows where you'll have 2 double game weeks this year. We have a chip called Bench Boost, which we like to use in a double game week. We have a chip called a Free Hit, which we also prefer, but we don't have to use it in a double game week. And we have a triple captain. So we have 3 chips, which we like to use in a double, but only 2 weeks. So there is one theory which says Free Hit can be just played in a blank game week. Then you have 2 doubles for your triple captain and your Bench Boost.
Yep.
The thing that complicates it is one mystery chip, the most annoying thing.
Yeah, if you haven't seen, by the way, when the game launched, FPL launched it, there's a mystery chip, and we'll find out what that is in December, I think they said.
Correct. So mystery chip could be just faff, and you would have to just play it the next week and you can pick 4 players from any team, and you go, okay, I'll just do it randomly any week. Or it could be like a limitless, where you go, I'm going to play it in a double game week because this is exciting.
In which case you've got another chip then to use.
Exactly. Then you have another chip to play in a double game week. And now you think, okay, which am I going to sacrifice? Bench Boost I like for double, definitely. Maybe this mystery chip plays in a double game week. So then triple captain needs to be in a single game week. Then we get into the argument of what is the highest ceiling fixture for the highest ceiling player? That's Haaland home to Ipswich. When he's not playing Champions League, he probably plays 90 minutes. And therefore, the argument to play the triple captain this week can also be understood.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite convincing. And also, KDB's fit. Foden's likely to start.
Yeah.
We kind of know the 11. Rico Lewis, I think, is very good for Haaland in terms of he'll create chances. Bernardo Silva potentially starts as well.
Right.
When you look at everything together, apart from maybe the absence of Rodri again, the team's in a pretty good position. Of course, like we said, there is some rustiness, but I get it. I just think we don't know what the mystery chip is. You can again play the free hit in a blank game week. And therefore, I think there will be one double game week in which you can triple captain. But if you get to the end of the season, that's not the case, then maybe this was the best opportunity.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you get to the end of the season, that again is the case, then there will be another opportunity to captain Salah against Southampton or something like that.
That's exactly it.
Where you can do it. So probably not for me, same probably not for you, but
same for me.
More justification than normal. Because in a normal season, we just say no.
Absolutely no in a normal season. So yeah, that's why I needed 10 more seconds, more than 10 seconds.
I like that. Perfect. So the next section is the prediction game. So every single episode, if you are new, by the way, please consider subscribing and liking. If you're on YouTube or if you're on audio, make sure you follow along, rate 5-star, really appreciate it. This is a little game we do where the guest will pick 3 players for the upcoming game week that they think will score the most points. But crucially, those players have to be below 10% ownership. Otherwise, everyone will just say sort of Salah, Haaland, Trent every week. So I've got your list here. We'll go through one by one, not to spoil it for the audience, but these are 3 players that you think, as of right now, obviously early in the week, will do well in game week 2. So the first is at 7.9%, Kevin De Bruyne against Ipswich. So we're expecting him to start again. A little bit disappointing, I suppose, in game week 1 against Chelsea, but you just fancy him if he starts that game, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, against Chelsea, we forget Chelsea's midfield is actually very strong. Those are 3 good midfielders. So there was a lot of tracking back, a lot of hard work he had to do. I'm expecting more possession for Man City against Ipswich, even though Ipswich did press well, as we talked about. But he's because of the winger problem, Foden's not going to get in his way as much. He probably plays on the right or the left. Doku's going to play right or the left. So it's him and Bernardo Silva. Bernardo Silva is the harder worker usually. So I just think De Bruyne will be almost like a 10. I expect him to do well.
Yeah. I kind of want De Bruyne this week. There's no way for me to get him in. Let me ask you a question then. So there will be some people out there that went without Haaland and they've got Salah and De Bruyne sat in their team. Would you captain De Bruyne, or do you think you'd still land on Salah for the Pens?
Salah's fixture's good as well, so I would still be on Salah.
Okay, perfect. Speaking of Liverpool, second player, Andy Robertson, who we didn't actually really speak about in the Liverpool section, but played very well.
Yeah.
Also got forward a fair amount. I mean, he is no Trent, but he's obviously 1 million cheaper. You've obviously picked him for this game in game week 2, but is Robertson a genuine option?
He's a genuinely good option this week and going forward.
Yeah.
The only reason why people didn't go for him game week 1 was because he had these injury doubts and Tsimikas was starting. Like, I had him above a Guardiola or a Gabriel to start with, again, because of my strategy having 3 Liverpool. Yeah. And before Jota emerged, I think Robertson is probably, I would even say, better than Jota as the 3rd best Liverpool pick if he continues to start, which I expect. Like, a lot of people are saying he's aging, there's other alternatives. I just think he's still a solid pick for 6 billion.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tsimikas is the only competition. It sounds like Joe Gomez could be off, potentially, who would be the other person that could play at left back. So, yeah, I maybe overlooked how nailed Robertson might be. And now that we know that he started the season, he's looked good. He did take set pieces as well. Interesting, this is only interesting for me as a football nerd, but under Klopp, they played a lot of out-swinging corners. So Robertson would take them from the left side, Trent from the right side. They're actually taking in-swinging corners now. So Trent runs out to the other side and Robertson runs out to that side. I like that. Statistically, I think out-swinging corners are actually better, but just from an eye test perspective, I like seeing teams take in-swinging corners.
That's what Arsenal do, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that works very, very well for them. But I think statistically, without getting into the physics of it, with an out-swinging corner, it will hit the head of the player much harder than an in-swinging. But I think if they've got a good delivery, which Robertson and Trent do, I think we could see a lot of corners scored for Liverpool this season. That's my prediction, is that we'll see a higher percentage of their goals come from set pieces. And then the third player I would love in my team, and I think you're probably the same, although you do have some cover, is actually Muniz of Fulham against Leicester at home. Is there some part of you that wished you'd gone for him rather than João Pedro, or are you?
I have. So if you ask me about my game week 1 regret, it was not going for Eze.
Okay.
So getting Gordon, because of these Eze rumors, right? I mean, I saw these tweets that now it is more likely that you can make a bet that it's more likely that Eze leaves than not. And then at 6:30 p.m. Fabrizio tweets that his release clause is now ended, and you're like, because in my team selection that I did on the wire, I had, instead of Gordon, I had Eze, and that 0.5 million instead of Pedro, I had Muniz.
Yeah, I prefer
that. So I prefer that as well now because I just think both have a higher upside.
Okay.
And so, but I ended up not going for him. But I think Muniz this week, home to Leicester, he should get 2-3 big chances and he should put at least one of them away.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Leicester perform tonight. Again, by the time you're watching or listening, you'll know. But even if they perform well, I still see that as a good fixture for Fulham because they are not new to the Prem, but they're back in the Prem for the first time in a season. So it'll be interesting to see how they perform. I really like your 3. So if you're on YouTube, I'll flash up the graphic now of the leaderboard. I mean, the other 2 guests have had an absolute stinker, mate. Harry and Focal, by the way, the first two guests. Two brilliant managers, by the way. But Harry went for Jota, Diaz, and Murphy. Very unlucky with Murphy, but he's gone away with 12 points then. And Focal went for KDB, also like you, Bowen, and Lewis Hall. Again, maybe slightly unfortunate, but that's 10.
I mean, Hall was lucky to get his 5.
True.
They conceded like 1.5 XG or something.
So you just need to beat 12 points. I would feel comfortable with going into game week 3 when we get the new guest on. I think you should be top of this leaderboard.
Hope so.
Fingers crossed. Right, there we go. So those are Praz's 3 differentials. So for this final bit then, I mean, we've spoken about our teams a lot, but we'll go through each of our teams and just explain why we're probably going to roll, in all honesty. But there are a couple of moves that I think each of us could end up making. But we both exercise patience as much as we can in FPL. So I'll read out your team for audio and then you can talk us through it. So Henderson in goal for Praz, followed by Trent, Hall and Robinson in defence. That's a very nice defence for fixtures. Gordon, Salah, Jota and Smith Rowe as a midfield. So double Liverpool midfield as well. I really do like your draft. And then João Pedro, Haaland and Isak as the front 3. Obviously Rodgers and Konsa on the bench because they play against probably the best team in the league. And you do have Barco, but he's tucked third sub. So likely to roll, but what do you think of your team? Are there any positions, I'll turn it just in case you need to see it, are there any positions that you see that you feel like need some attention, or are you just pretty happy with that?
So not attention, I wouldn't call it that, but if I had, let's say you give me 3 luxury transfers, right? So
yeah, that's a good one. So what would you do with your team?
I'd downgrade Gordon to Eze and upgrade João Pedro to Muniz. I think that's the thing that I talked about. And maybe change Barco. Those would be my 3 things that I would change if I got to do it all over again.
Yeah, but in general,
I'm happy.
It's a strong team. Is there any part of you that's tempted to not captain Haaland? Can I talk you out of it?
I mean, look, Salah is a great alternative this week. Like,
yeah, we did discuss this, didn't we?
Before this started, we were talking about how, the thing people talk about numbers, underlying numbers, market betting odds. They're also discovering things. They're also finding stuff out. And, when Game Week 1 started, the markets were not high on Salah as much as they were on Haaland. And now after one game week, we say we're reactionary. They are as well. Yeah. Because they've noticed that City are a little rusty. They've noticed that Liverpool are still, 18 shots a game. Yep. And so Salah's not too bad and Haaland's maybe not that great. So, I mean, I'm obviously exaggerating, but I think they're closer this week than people make out to be.
Yeah.
Music to your ears.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to hear. So basically, Salah's the best. So looking at my team, again, leaning towards rolling, but just for the audio listeners, it's Henderson in goal, Porro, Gabriel, Trent as a back 3, midfield 5 in Kunku, Eze, Saka, Salah captain at the moment, and Jota, and then Solanke and Isak as my front 2. I really do want to see that Spurs-Leicester game to just assess Porro and Solanke because Everton were very poor. If Spurs look good, then I'm feeling extremely comfortable about those two. Then the only issue is on my bench. Well, not issue, but thing to think about is I have Robinson, Cannon, Greaves. Cannon and Greaves obviously tucked second and third sub. But I do have Anthony Robinson there. The reason for choosing Robinson, by the way, is he rotates very, very nicely with Porro. So in game week 3 and 4, Porro has tricky fixtures. In game week 3 and 4, Robinson has decent ones. Not great. I think it's Ipswich and then West Ham. So Robinson was there for a reason, but I always knew that in game week 2, I would have a bit of a benching headache. So you would start Robinson ahead of Gabriel. What's your justification for that? Because I trust you as a manager, but at the moment, Gabriel is in my 11.
Well, look, my answer is they're bang on even. So it's a 50-50 call. So that whatever I say, it is a 50-50 call.
No, I'm going to hold you to this.
Yeah. But what I'll say is, look, we've seen that Gabriel isn't the best for bonus. We've had a change this year into the system. Raya has done well. Even in baseline, Saliba was higher. Aston score goals. So therefore, you're looking at a 6-pointer or a very low probability of a bullet header. There's like 3 a season. So I think you can take those odds on. As opposed to a Robinson, who has a very, very good fixture. We'll see how Leicester is. We may change our priors again after looking tonight. But then he is attacking, good on bonus. So therefore, a clean sheet could come with a bonus anyway. And then you're adding attacking returns, which I think are better as well. So obviously worse team. But if you look at clean sheet odds, they should be similar because you're away to Villa versus home to Leicester. Yep. So similar clean sheet odds. Therefore, then the team should be taken out of the equation. It should just be clean sheet odds, attacking threat, bonus. And so for those 3, I like Robinson this week.
You might have convinced me. I think this is going to be one of those that I'm panicking about on the deadline stream last minute, trying to work out what to do. I'd love to know in the comments, if you're watching on YouTube, who would you start out of Gabriel and Robinson? Again, I think we need to see how Leicester play. Not that should influence us too much, but it will give us a bit of an idea about if they're going to start the season well. And yeah, I think that's going to be a decision that goes
Leicester
down.
Have no strikers, right? No fit strikers as well.
I don't think so.
Another
Which is why I chose Cannon, but apparently even Cannon they do not want to play. He's not in favour. But yeah, maybe that will be another thing that makes me lean towards Robinson. There's an option. I do like it. I love Arsenal defence, as you know.
Of course.
And this is the sort of the game away at Villa. They're just
0-0,
they'll
1-0.
somehow get a clean sheet in
You
it.
can
So
see it.
yeah, absolutely. Right, so those are our teams. Thank you for being here today, mate. It's been really nice, actually.
Absolute pleasure, man. And like I said at the beginning, it's really lovely to see the journey you've been on. And I was telling you before, like many people won't know this. Like you and I started our Twitter accounts at almost the same time.
Yeah, we came into the FPL community together.
Just before COVID, or I think just when COVID started.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was, when you join Twitter or any other social media platform, the guys who've joined together because you grow together. And then at some point, I think the official FPL had you as one of the guys
They
who
retweeted some of my
yeah,
work.
Yeah. And so then you flew up and we were like, go Raptor. And then now look where you've come, man. So really proud of what you've done. And, it's lovely to be on here.
I appreciate it, man. I'm so glad I got you on as early as I did. And I will be having you back on very, very soon, I'm sure, because it's great to always hear your comments. And well done as well for going against the template with that Salah and Haaland draft. And I hope it works out for you. And I think the further we get along, this team's going to put you in a better and better position. It's going to be one of those where people are scrambling, but you've got the money to distribute and you've got the flexibility. So,
hope so.
Hopefully it works out well for you. Apart from Haaland this week, I hope he plays. All right, guys. So yeah, if you have been watching, you've been enjoying, please make sure to like the video on YouTube and subscribe as well. Trying to hit 10,000 subscribers within the next month, which I know is quite optimistic, but please subscribe if you've enjoyed it. And if you are listening on audio, please do rate 5-star. It's incredibly important for it to be pushed out on the charts and stuff like that. So I would really appreciate it. And as I said, please check out the FPL Wire. Incredible content every week from Zoff, Pranil, and also Pras as well, on audio or on YouTube. And also check out Pras on Twitter as well. He's always got little insightful nuggets on there as well. So thank you for coming on today. Thank you for watching and listening, and we will catch you next time.